I think it's absolutely insane, but I feel it is like a duty.
How long do you think it is until I go to the doctor and they're like, there's three options. It's paracetamol, it's ibuprofen, or there's Turmeric Co shots.
Although, the adulation of being a Premier League international footballer is amazing, scoring goals is amazing, actually the impact that I'm having now is actually more meaningful to me. It's okay to have a passion outside of professional football or sport on the basis it has zero impact on your ability to perform. Going through that taught me a lot about, the power of the mind, the power of resilience, the power of perseverance. The challenge of what we're doing is insurmountable. I think that literally every single day. My mission is basically just to create access for this, to democratize that ability to have access to these truly functional, truly healthy products. Yeah, the reality is we've lived in a food system which hasn't prioritized health, it's prioritized profit.
What was the steps that you took from homebrew effectively to scale operation? Thomas, I have to start by asking you the question. You're doing a lot of exciting stuff in business right now. Is anything you've done in business so far as exciting as that Cruyff turn goal against Belgium in the quarterfinals of the Euros 2016?
Yeah, no, I'd say that was obviously a special moment in my career. To achieve what we achieved as a nation, a minnow nation in a major tournament.
It was wild. Yeah. I remember watching it. I was like, this is actually wild what you guys had achieved.
It was, we were the last home nation in the tournament, got through to the semi-finals. Obviously scored a really important goal in the quarterfinals, knocking Belgium out, which was, definitely a highlight of my career. But I think when you relate that to business, I would probably say, the passion that we have at the Turmeric Co and what we're doing in terms of like fundamentally changing people's lives through natural nutrition. We had a testimonial probably 10 days ago from a customer who had 2 double knee replacements, couldn't recover from them, then began taking medication and drugs which caused her to lose her teeth.
Oh, wow.
She then couldn't eat properly. She was then bedridden, came across an ad online of the Turmeric Co, ordered the product, began using it, and has been using it for over a year, and is now fully recovered, walking around, mobile, back to work. And so I'd probably say, although, the adulation of being a Premier League international footballer is amazing, scoring goals is amazing, actually the impact that I'm having now is actually more meaningful to me.
Really? I suppose the sort of the goal moments of stuff like that, standing there singing the national anthem, scoring a goal, that's kind of momentarily amazing. I can only imagine what it's like. But the whole thing of knowing that lady is now back to work today and living her life again, there's almost like a long tail of fuel that gives you, whereas the other form is kind of a very short burst, but a very intense burst, I guess, of adrenaline and celebration.
Yeah, definitely. And, we've now had over 20,000 life-changing customer testimonials of people in all different walks of life. It's like that single testimonial is significant, but then when you multiply that and multiply that again, actually it's for me a lot more impactful. So,
and this is obviously a company that was, as a lot of companies are, built to scratch your own itch initially, because you were a super talented youth player, got, by the sounds of it, the worst tackle in history, but from your sort of telling of it, a knee-high tackle at 15 when you were playing sort of academy football, and your left knee ended up in the place where your right knee should have been. What was that like as a kid? Because you took a year, you had surgeries and all that sort of stuff. You played at a very good level and you took a year to recover. You then come back and get the same injury the first match back. What does that do to your head as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid who only wants to be a footballer?
Yeah, it was like difficult and challenging times. And that original injury, there was actually a picture on the internet of it.
Oh.
The game was covered, and the club had to request for that picture to be taken down. I obviously didn't ever search for it again, and it was a real horrific experience. Rupturing your knee and basically having a limp leg. I tried to stand up post tackle, and my knee literally just gave way, sort of flopped. So it was difficult. Went through reconstructive surgery first time round, and then had 12 months of rehabilitation in my first game back. Same injury happened. So, I think the mentality for me at that point, sort of became everything. And it wasn't like conscious at the time. Like I didn't, there were nights where I'd cry myself to sleep. There were nights of, or constant self-doubt, constant uncertainty. I was at a point where the club, Reading Football Club, which I'd signed for as a 15-year-old, was sort of, I could sense that they were contemplating, releasing me because, what's the point in having a professional player who can't get fit? And so, I had to sort of live resilience, and again, like I've got my own kids now, it's like, would I want my kids to go through that? Like I personally wouldn't, but actually going through that taught me a lot about, the power of the mind, the power of resilience, the power of perseverance. And I think that perseverance eventually led us to, sort of natural functional nutrition. Towards the latter part of my recovery, where I simply couldn't recover anymore, I was prescribed sort of standard medication, so drugs, anti-inflammatories, painkillers. And 2 weeks of using this medication, my body had a complete adverse reaction to. So I started passing blood in my urine, had severe nausea, couldn't sleep. All standard side effects if you sort of read the small print. So I had to stop taking this medication, but I was still hampered with this chronic pain, inflammation and swelling in my knee. And so, my father and I began looking at natural remedies that supported recovery in various different, cultures and practices around the world, using essentially natural raw ingredients and things like whole watermelon, things like pineapple, pomegranate, whole ginger, and subsequently whole turmeric root. We read of, and they were sworn by in these cultures and in these practices, effectively as medicine, right? Like it was spoken about in those terms. And my father basically sourced all of these raw ingredients, turned them into this blend. It was my last chance of recovery. After that, I had no other option. So I religiously took it. And long story short is 6 weeks after taking this blend religiously, I was pain-free.
That's mad.
And I went on to have the career that I had. The doctors, physios, surgeons at the club had no idea what had happened because I didn't tell them. I was sort of disillusioned with the existing legacy structure of sort of healthcare, and went on to have a career at the highest level of professional football, completely pain free
for a long time as well. Played for a long time and could have probably carried on if you'd have wanted to as well, from what I could work out.
I retired in 2021. My final game was in the Premier League, away to Leeds. Scored, but
what a way to go out!
Yeah, but unfortunately, West Brom were relegated that season under Sam Allardyce, we had launched the Turmeric Co 3 years earlier. It was growing, it was scaling, it was taking more of my time, and actually, we're receiving, these life-changing customer testimonials. So it was, taking more of my passion as well. And I basically decided to call it a day in 2021. And actually physically, I probably felt the best I'd ever felt in my career at that moment in time. So, I'm 36 now. I'm confident I could still be playing at a decent level, but it was my choice, my terms that I finished playing football on.
And was that decision gradual over time? Was it sort of like the more of these testimonials kept coming in, like, oh my God, we've helped another one, we've helped another one, we've helped another one? Or was there almost like a moment of, I can either re-sign, I know I'm going to have a couple of weeks off, I'm then going to go back into pre-season. You probably could have still played international from, because you were playing at such a good level. Was it an instant decision, or is it something that gradually gnawed at you? You're like, I've just got to go and do this. This is my new purpose.
Yeah, I think it was gradual, to be honest. Like I had decent offers, in the Championship abroad. Nottingham Forest came in for me. That was the season before they got promoted to the Premier League. Had offers from Turkey, a few offers from UAE. But as I said, it was just that sort of gradual, acknowledgement of actually I'm running this business, we're impacting people. It's taking more of my time up. We were going through a big project at the time. We're moving our manufacturing site to a larger site outside of London, and I just eventually just said, actually, this is my full-time job. And to be honest, I was doing it full-time, since we launched in 2018, and so I was running it alongside being a professional footballer. It's just that, as a professional footballer, you spend 3 hours of the day in real intense activity, which you need to be fully focused on. But either side of that, before training, after training, and, on the weekends after a game, like, it was free time. And, a lot of players would fill that time with, playing FIFA on PlayStation or, playing golf. And I filled it with, running and growing the business.
I suppose it was a very different time, though, at that point. I know we're only looking back retrospectively, sub 10 years, but there was a thought at the time, because I worked with a few footballers, I still work with a few footballers, actually, and there's definitely was a mentality from the fan base, and maybe from the clubs, I don't know, that your job as a professional footballer, that's the thing you should be focusing on, and anything outside of that is a distraction and shouldn't be allowed. I remember, I worked with Kev Stewart, who played for Liverpool and Blackpool, and he was doing property investment. He's just started talking about, I'm doing this property investment, and the fans would be livid. Now, when you're playing well, you can probably get away with it to a certain extent, but when Blackpool weren't playing well, they're like, it's because you're, doing a fucking property investment, not focus on the football. Was there the pressure at that time? Did you have to sort of like hide the side hustle as it was at the time?
Yeah, no, on the contrary, it was a brand, and, it was on the market, and, I was open around it. I would say, I think it's definitely not black and white in terms of, should you or shouldn't you not be focused on anything outside of professional football. Like, professional football is one of the most intense careers you can have. Like, the life commitment, sacrifices that you have to make in order to perform at a consistent level are insane. And that mentality, you can't do anything that would disrupt that mentality, right? So, you certainly shouldn't be doing another sport. You certainly shouldn't be, doing anything which is influencing you or taking you out of a routine which is required to perform. And the reality is like I said, like, for those periods of time where you were, on the training pitch, or you were preparing for a game where you needed to analyze the opposition, like, that's the work, right? Outside of that, it's then about recovery. How well are you recovering? Again, physically, I was an advocate, obviously, of the turmeric shot. So I was living and breathing, health and wellness, routine, that fitness, that overall health and longevity. And it showed in my career. So because none of that was impacting my ability to perform, there wasn't a manager or a teammate who could question my commitment to football. And again, look, I was always first one into the training ground, last one to leave. So I was basically passionate about two jobs and two roles, which I was actually able to do because physically football was extremely intense, and there is a mental stress with professional football as well. And I basically used my time outside of football to de-stress by working. And it sounds so strange, but actually, I could process 1,000 emails in a day, right? Because actually it was a mental stimulus, which maybe from an intellectual perspective you weren't getting playing professional football. So for me personally, it was I was able to do both, but I would be very clear that it's okay to have a passion outside of professional football or sport on the basis it has zero impact on your ability to perform.
I suppose the business that you were running is performative in nature anyway. So actually anything that you're doing outside of it, any discoveries that your head of science might come up with, or the white papers you're working on, for example, maybe you weren't at that stage at that point in time, but it's only going to make you a better player and recover faster and better anyway. It's not as if it's like, you're running a nightclub or a bar and it's juxtaposed to performance. Let's pause there, because what Thomas is really talking about here is a fascinating look at his mentality and his genuine belief in what he was building. There's often this idea that, if you're a professional athlete or you're operating at a very high level in any field, you have to be completely zoned in on the one single task at hand, one-dimensional to a certain extent. The job can become your whole identity, and any interest outside of it is basically seen as a distraction. Any side hustle somehow means that you're less committed, but that's actually not the right way to look at things, even if that's how most people do look at it. The real question is, does any side quest that you're doing affect your priority task performance? Because if it does damage your focus, your recovery, your preparation, or your standards, then yeah, of course, it's a problem. But if the side hustle is something that sits around the edges of your main thing, if it gives you purpose and stimulation and perspective, or even just helps you with your mentality of switching off in a healthy way, then it might actually make you better. Like in Thomas's case, realistically, had it not been for the product that he and his dad developed, his career would have been a lot shorter. So the side hustle kept his career going. So what's interesting in this pause point is that Thomas isn't describing a side hustle that pulled him away from football. He's actually talking about something that helped alongside it. He didn't have to compromise his performance. He still performed. He still recovered. He still showed the standards required to play at the very top level. And because of that, the business wasn't actually a threat to his football. It was simply another channel for his energy and his ambition. And I think this matters far beyond professional sport, because a lot of ambitious people feel guilty for wanting more than one outlet. I know I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. You think if you're serious about one thing, you're only allowed to be interested in that one thing and nothing else. That's just not true. The issue is not having another interest. The issue is whether you are using it to escape the hard bits of your main job, or whether it genuinely sits in harmony with it. And that's a very different thing. Now let's get back to it. We've got to go back to talking, I think, about the person who was a big catalyst of this, which was your dad. And he didn't have any form of sort of traditional training in raw medicine or anything like that, did he? No. Subsequently, you found out that there was actually a bit of a lineage of it. But to start with, he's just a loving father who's like, I don't want to see my kids suffer. Read a load of stuff from a library, mix it together and try and make him eat it. What was the sort of like the very, very early origins of what your dad effectively home-brewed in the kitchen?
No, he was a civil servant, so lived a normal life, but he was always he was always tinkering in the kitchen, and would have certain things growing up, various different like soups or various different blends. I remember as a kid him always wanting me to have this honey and lemon combination, but it wasn't something you would actually enjoy. And it actually put me off honey for the early part of my childhood. But they say like true innovation is born from necessity, and I was simply in need. Like I was being told by doctors, surgeons, physios that I had to live with pain. But at the same time, by living with pain, I couldn't perform or I couldn't have a career. So it was effectively like the last chance saloon, and he whipped up this blend in the kitchen. Originally, it was like a paste, but everything that we had read was about, consistent repeated use. So he knew he had to get it into a format that was, convenient and easy to consume. And I was pretty fussy as a teenager as well, so he had to make it taste, decent. And that sort of innovation, that direction allowed him to create this blend. There's no way, like I'm quite comfortable saying like I could not replicate the blend. Like I would. It's a very unique blend in how it was extracted, the combination of the ingredients and the process involved in that. So he's definitely got that uniqueness in terms of ability. And he is now co-founder of the business, but also our innovation director, and he's developed numerous amounts of innovation, beyond the Turmeric Co range, and also within the Turmeric Co range, which, for me just absolutely blows my mind. Like some of the hydration juices that he's created, some of the meal replacements that he's created, like I would not touch anything on the shelf, which is hydration, on a retail shelf, which is selling hydration or selling meal replacement right now. But what he has developed, in the kitchen and now in the factory is unbelievable. And my passion, like my mission, is basically just to create access for this, to democratize that ability to have access to these truly functional, truly healthy products. And the reality is we've lived in a food system which hasn't prioritized health, it's prioritized profit. And outcome of that is that we now have a society which is full of ill health, full of disease. And, everyone asks the question, why is the NHS, having to pay 230 odd billion a year because of the ill health of the nation? Well, it's driven by lifestyle and nutrition. And so if you begin to change those and, build education around them and create ease of access to these healthy habits, the health of the nation will change. And when you think and when you look, like, it is fascinating to see like the grip hold that unhealthy products and brands have on society. And so with the Turmeric Co and with the business that we're creating, like, we're looking to create new options for that. And we're not saying, don't touch a Coca-Cola, don't touch a soda. Yeah, like I will have a Coca-Cola when I choose to have one, but I don't drink it for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And the reality is that there are a lot of people who actually do, simply because they are now addicted to that sugar hit. They're addicted to that form of consumption. And so, it's definitely a fascinating space to be in, but it's an important one at the same time.
Have you ever got to a point where you thought this is insurmountable? Because you're basically taking on big food and big pharma, and you still have to say things like I've heard you talk about in other podcasts in the run-up to this, it's anecdotally this stuff works, which must be so frustrating because it's not anecdotally that it works. 20,000 other people have also given you a 5-star review and gone, this stuff is working for me. The lady who's lost her teeth, can't go to work, can't get out of bed, is now living a better life today. But you still have to say anecdotal because of the, like you said, the grip hold that big pharma and big food effectively have got. Have you ever gone, I was just a football player and this worked for me and my dad made it in the kitchen. I like a challenge, but this is a step too far. Or do you thrive on the challenge?
Yeah, no, I would say thankfully in the work that the team have done and we've done as a business, we're now able to begin to say this isn't anecdotal. Like, we are now capturing data which is showing significant movements in health markers when using our range versus not. And those health markers are inflammation related, they are gut health related, they are immunity related. And so for us, we know that the big focus is on just building the data. We are passionate about, not only tracking, subjective impacts of our range through consumer experiences, but also what actually happens to the body in a clinical setting when using our range. And it is, for me, like, astounding. Still, even though I've lived and breathed, the personal experience of what having a healthy diet and a range and a blend of functional ingredients can do to you, but it's still mind blowing. And that's what we want to just make mainstream. And do I think it's the challenge of what we're doing is insurmountable? I think that literally every single day. I think it's absolutely insane in what we're trying to do. But
I knew there was a but coming.
But we are like, I feel it is like a duty that, for us to deliver on what we're focused on delivering. Like, what happens in a world where the Turmeric Co shots outsell Coca-Cola? What does that world look like? Like, is that world healthier? Is that world full of more freedom, less sadness, more productivity for the nation, less people, having time off work? Like, what does that world actually look like? And then if you go one step further, like, what does a world look like where functional medicine is actually accepted by the NHS? And ranges such as the Turmeric Co are prescribed to people of ill health or deteriorating health, or people in pain, people in chronic inflammation. I believe that there would be a significant reduction in the cost of the NHS if that came to fruition. And so, that's what wakes us up in the morning and gives us the passion to keep doing what we're doing.
What sort of inroads are you trying to make to things like the NHS with, I don't know, I think the average cost of keeping someone in a bed is like £2,000 a day or something. Maybe the figure is a bit rogue, but from the best sort of research I could do, 2,000 quid a day. And there must be so many people who've had a hip replacement, a knee replacement that are recovering. And the challenge that they have got is inflammation, which, like you say, not anecdotally, but data driven, this helps. Surely it just stands to reason that at some point, someone in procurement of the NHS goes, well, hang on a second. This guy's done it. 20,000 other people have done it. Let's give Doris with her new knees some shots of turmeric and try and get her out of the bed even a week quicker. We've saved ourselves 14,000 quid at £2,000 a day. Why is that not happening right now?
Yes, it's a good question. I think the NHS is a massive machine, and the reality also is is ill health a commodity or an industry? You have to sort of begin to ask those questions. I would say, look, like the current state of the NHS as an example, like it cannot be in the state that it's in 10 years time, because if it is, it won't be there anymore.
Yeah.
It just simply isn't sustainable. So there has to be decisions made at some point to begin to look at, like preventative healthcare as opposed to just solely focused on treatment-based healthcare. And, when you look at preventative healthcare, like a big foundational driver of that is functional medicine, and the functional medicine tree is based on some core pillars, lifestyle, stress, are pillars within those, but the largest pillar is nutrition. So there is growing awareness within it, and it's just taking time for it to be accepted. Because, if you think 75 years ago, maybe closer to 100 years ago, cigarettes were used as medication.
Yeah, true, yeah.
So it's almost like it takes time for practices and accepted beliefs to change. And all we're doing is changing a belief that, if you think about society and you think about health, you immediately correlate treatment of health with medication. That's just a natural, okay, what prescription do I need to get? What drugs do I need to take? What can I get from the pharmacy? And actually, like, that's distorted. Like that, what surely the thought process to ill health or ailments can be like, what drove that? What created that? And can I change one of those pillars or all of those pillars to then change the outcome of my health? And so, it's just that acceptance of a new belief is all that needs to take place. And look, I say all that needs to take place. That's,
it's
that's
quite a big all, though,
that's
isn't
the
it?
massive, that's the massive challenge ahead. But as I said, like, our mission and my mission is about getting the product in as many people's hands as possible and changing the lives of as many people as possible, and also beginning to build empirical data around, the changes that we see.
How long do you think it is until I go to a doctor and they're like, there's 3 options. It's paracetamol, ibuprofen, or there's Turmeric Co shots. How far off are we from that?
Yeah, I would say, whether that happens in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 20 years, I think it could be any of the above. But, that's the mission we're undertaking, and that's what we're committed to seeing. And I think, as I said, what does that world look like when that becomes the case?
Wow. Okay, let's pause there, because what Thomas is really describing here is not just a product business. It's a brand willing to challenge an entire system. And that is huge, especially as he's knowingly going to be going into battle with big food and big pharma, two enemies that are very hard to battle against, quite frankly. Most brands are competing within an existing category. They're trying to win a share of the shelf space. They're trying to win attention. They're trying to win customers from someone else. But some brands, like in this case, they're doing something that's much harder than that. They're not just trying to sell a better product. They're trying to change the way that people think. And that's really what the Turmeric company is up against. Thomas is not just saying our shots taste good or our branding is stronger or even that our product works better. He's saying something much bigger than that. He's saying that we live in a system where food has often prioritized profit over health, where treatment is often valued more than prevention, and where people have been trained to think about health through medication first rather than the things that may have caused the issues in the first place. This is not a normal brand challenge. This is a belief system challenge, a deeply ingrained and frankly a deeply funded belief system that has been very intentionally curated. Let's not get all conspiracy theory about it. But that's why a business like this is so difficult to build, because when you're trying to change a whole system, you're not just trying to ask someone to try something new. You're asking them to question what they've been told for years. You're asking them to rethink their habits, their assumptions, and the trusted structures that they have in their mind. And that is much bigger than just asking someone to switch from one soft drink to another. And it's why brands like this need more than just good marketing. They need education, they need evidence, they need patience, they need consistency. They need a founder who actually believes in the mission deeply enough to keep going when the category pushes back, and it will push back. But while this might sound like an insurmountable task, I think that Thomas might just be the guy who could win this fight. Now, let's get back to it. Looking at sort of the scale up journey that you're on, I found this really interesting because obviously your dad is the first person who makes this semi-palatable paste for a picky teenager. You use it 6 weeks later, you're recovered or on your way to recovery. No one at the club can work it out. You keep it quiet because whether you think it's a bit woo-woo or whatever, you're just like, I'm just going to go and do this. But going from one guy going through 50 blenders and every item of kitchen utensils being yellow in the kitchen to scaling up to what you're doing now, which is sort of circa 300,000 units a week. That's a massive jump. What was the steps that you took from kitchen table, homebrew effectively, to scale operation?
Yeah, it was, it's been a wild journey, to be honest. I think when you think about like brands in the consumer packaged goods space, you know, whether you're a snack brand or whether you're a beverage brand, the first thing you always look for is a manufacturer. And I actually don't know of any current brands on the market or in our category who manufacture their own products. Like from a, you know, sort of startup challenger brand perspective, like I think there are none. And there are none because it is almost impossible to do. And actually, you know, I'll you know, talk to founders or budding entrepreneurs within the consumer goods space now, and you know, they'll talk to me about their supply chain and their sort of plans for manufacture. And, you know, if they ever mention that they want to manufacture their products, I will tell them not to, because the investment in time, resource that you have to make that work is bigger than you could even imagine. And so,
but you guys had to, didn't you, at the very start?
Yeah, we and again, like we were forced down that route, and we were forced down that route simply because the manufacturers of, you know, beverages and, you know, fresh beverages, I wouldn't call them functional because they're not functional, but like fresh beverages, the existing manufacturers in the space, like simply refused to manufacture our blend for us because they firstly couldn't replicate the extraction process. They wouldn't add that level of complexity and that processing and those raw materials into their supply chain. They said impossible to happen, and actually would never do it. And so, yeah, the uniqueness of our blends and the uniqueness of our processes is what drove us to basically having to set it up from scratch ourselves. So we essentially flattened a few garages in London and created a bespoke mini manufacturing unit, figured out how to scale a kitchen process, you know, using a lot of kitchen utensils, a lot of, you know, kitchen blenders, crushers, sieves. We figured out how to replicate that process at a decent scale, not a massive scale. And sort of invested into the equipment, invested into the process, began looking at supply chain of raw materials, then began looking at food manufacturing standards, compliance, regulations. And this was all ongoing between 2016 and 2018 while I was still playing.
And are you bootstrapping this as well? So you guys are self-funding this?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was self-funded, to get it off the ground and to get it into those initial scale periods. And we basically had a process in place, had a site in place, and we were ready to launch in 2018. And we thought, okay, well, we've got the manufacturing capability, and in the manufacturing, on the manufacturing floor was, my brother, my dad, our auntie, our uncle, as we began to produce more and more. But
proper cottage industry then, in the truest sense.
It really was. And we launched in 2018, focused on actually where and how do we meet consumers? We didn't want to sit on a retail shelf. We actually wanted to meet consumers at the point of, them being at home and allow us direct to consumer to take consumers through the journey that they would go on when using our range. And so, we launched the Turmeric Co direct to consumer 2018 with a subscription model. And as I said, from there, we just took off. Yeah.
And how quickly did you outgrow, you go from kitchen to mini factory in the garden effectively from 2016 to 2018. And from what I've heard you say on other shows, you got to sort of a 10,000 unit capacity. How quickly did you go, oh my God, we need something even bigger now?
Yeah, it was 2020. We hit capacity. So
2 years later, you've got to do the whole thing again, scale again.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big project. So we moved from a 1,200 square foot site to a 20,000 square foot site. And that was complex. That was, and it took about over 2.5 years to eventually move and commission a new site. A massive amount of effort. During that time, we're still obviously, producing the product, selling the product, growing the brand.
It's also COVID and lockdowns and all that kind of craziness.
Went through all of that. It was a big step, us commissioning the new site. We went from, a 1,200 square foot site to a 20,000 square foot site. And when we moved into the new site, we were using a tiny little corner of it. We had all of our existing equipment there, internalized fulfillment. And so we were, essentially fully vertically integrated, and that became our superpower in terms of, innovation, speed of execution. And the big focus was on manufacturing standards. We went for the highest level of food manufacture that you can achieve. We obtained that very quickly from moving in. It's called a BRC standard. So the standard is BRCGS AA+, and we were awarded that after a 2-day audit. And that's been the benchmark for everything that we've done and built around the business. And when I look at the product ranges on market and what is available within sort of functional beverage and functional shots, one of my proudest achievements is the fact that we've been able to deliver a blend which is so far superior than other products on the market. You can go into most retailers now and pick up a shot, but the reality is that shot is full of apple juice, full of orange juice. It's been pasteurized. The functional ingredients have been denatured because of the heat processing they've gone through, or they're using powder. So you're getting zero health benefits from consuming that shot. And yet we've been able to launch the Turmeric Co to market, bring it into retail stores at exactly the same price as these apple juice and orange juice based shots. And that's probably, for me, when I think about the business, that's one of the biggest accomplishments we have achieved, because the process is so unique. The blends are so unique. We use proprietary recipes and, blends that we've now trademarked and are our trade secrets. And the raw ingredients that we use are whole, fresh, functional raw ingredients. Things like we use watermelon as the base versus, the apple juice or orange juice or water fillers on the market. The turmeric content, quality, ginger. So really proud and passionate at the fact that we've achieved that.
When you obviously went from cottage industry and using friends and family and calling in favours and twisting people's arms to come and work in the factory floor in the garden at the bottom of the sort of 1,200 square foot area, then you moved, scale and size and geography. You went from sort of London to Cambridge. So now you've got to manage at a distance and you've got to manage a different scale and scope of team. What was the biggest challenge, would you say, that you went through as a founder of going from startup incubator almost, where you can literally touch and feel everything yourself, to, actually, this is now 100 miles up the road and I'm still a professional footballer on the side. What was the biggest challenge you went through, would you say?
Well, I retired from football at that point. So okay, fine. So I was able to focus entirely on the business from 2021. And then we commissioned a new site back end of 2022, early 23. But I would say, moving from startup to scale up, you basically have to professionalize everything that you would do on the fly as an entrepreneur. And if you're a passionate entrepreneur, like, you'll be in the detail, you'll be, hungry for results, you're willing to work crazy hours. And one of the things you realize as you begin to scale up is that you need people around you with the same passion, with that same willingness to apply themselves to work and to execution. And you ideally want people who are better at doing certain elements of the business than you are. And, as a founder, like you said, when the business is small, you can touch and feel everything. And if you spend enough time and you have an obsessive nature, you're going to know elements of that business, or in some cases, the entire business inside out. Because you will have literally had to have built that business brick by brick, right? And that was very much the case for us. Like, I was very much in detail. I knew everything that was happening within the business, when it needed to happen, if it was off track or if it was on track, and what the next step would be. And as you then go into scale up, like, it's impossible for you to spread yourself across all of these areas. And so, when we had a team and we were transitioning from the startup to the scale up phase. So just that transitionary period, we maybe went to, 7-8 employees. Like, the big focus or the big realization that I had was at some stage you need generalists within a business. So, you're a generalist as a entrepreneur because you're overseeing, sales and marketing, brand, you're overseeing, manufacturing, procurement, supply chain. And so you're a generalist, and you're good at being a generalist because you're so committed to what you're doing. And again, being good at anything is just spending enough time doing it, right? And as you begin to go through that sort of startup to scale up phase, it's beneficial having more generalists around you, because you want them to be able to cover multiple functions and multiple facets of the business. And so you initially build a team of generalists around you as a generalist. And so you begin to move from that startup into scale up phase. But then when you go to that next level of business where you begin to really grow and you need to go from a team of, 5, 8, 10 to, 20, 25, 30, you actually realize that you then need specialists in every single area. And actually the role of the, CEO, founder, leadership team is to make sure that that happens. And yeah, within that, there's a lot of difficult conversations because, sometimes it's easier being a generalist because you're involved in everything. You get lots of, gratification because you're involved in all of the wins, and you don't maybe want to just focus on a single area, but that's what the business needs. And so, yeah, so I'd say a long answer to your question, like the biggest thing that I realized going from startup to scale up was that firstly, all business is always about people. Like that's always the case. Like, business is only as good as the people who are behind that business. But actually you need to make that transition of having the right people in the right seat in every seat of your organization. And ideally you want to get people who are in their unique ability at all times, and that unique ability might be sales, it might be talking to customers, but actually it might not necessarily then being the account management of the sales channel that you've won. So actually you need to make sure that that person is fully focused on what they're amazing at doing that. And if you can build that, and it's tough, it's the work, it's non-stop, and there's always transition and always change. But if you can really focus on that, I'd probably say that is the single biggest lever that you can pull as a entrepreneur moving from a startup to a scale up to accelerate your growth.
How do you shift from that sort of how to who mentality, especially when you've created this vertical integration, you've created a mad supply chain that everyone said was actually impossible to do? How do you, and you've only got the level of knowledge that you've got up until that point in time, anything more than that, and I guess you're what they would class as unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. How do you then go, right, well, we need someone who's, like a legit gangster at fulfillment. We need someone who is a channel manager. So who did you turn to? And they were going, well, you need that person in next. Or did you still, even at that point, have to have your generalist hat on and go, well, I think it's that person. I think it's that person. I think it's that department.
Yeah. So I think, again, like even as a entrepreneur and a CEO, like you are the generalist when you start, but you then need to get into a specialist role. And that specialist role is a CEO of an organization, and that CEO of the organization is the individual who sets that vision, who builds a team who believe in that vision and actually sets a strategy to execute that vision. So that's the specialist role then of the CEO. And the work that you need to then do as a CEO, as a leader, is then not get involved in the detail and want to dip in and be like, okay, well, actually do things that way. And look, you're always going to give your opinion, and you need to make sure that those standards are set. And sometimes you have to do that. But actually, if you've got the right people in the right seats, then those types of activities become a thing of the past. And so how do you do that as a CEO or as an entrepreneur? You have to really begin to understand your business, so you have to make sure that the vision of your business is super clear, like why are we doing what we're doing? Like, what is our true purpose? You then have to really understand, like, what are the functions that your business needs to be as efficient and as effective as possible. And so, spending time on, building out a detailed accountability chart where there are owners of seats, like you have to do that. And again, it's like, okay, why does that matter? It matters because through that you create clarity. And when you have clarity, you remove ambiguity and you remove noise. And noise can create politicking within businesses. It's like, oh yeah, actually, no, what are we trying to do here? What needs to be done? Remove the ego, remove, your personal ambition from this situation. What is right for the business? And so you begin to build that sort of cycle, and that standard within the organization. And then, I think like within any organization, there are other elements that you need, pillars which consists of process. How do you streamline a process? Like, is it an SOP? Like, does it need to be, can it be cascaded in a memo? How do you make sure that the right thing happens at the right time every single time? And so, taking on board concepts like the Pareto rule, right? So, 20% of business activity and energy delivers 80% of business results. So make sure that 20% is, documented, detailed, and followed by all. And so, applying these types of methodologies like allow you as a, CEO or entrepreneur of a business to begin to build frameworks that move you from a startup into a scale up. And, you can get into the granularity, how do you manage data? Does every team member within the organization have a number that they are accountable for and that they are clear on how they deliver week in and week out, as an example. And then, like within all of that, you then drive that traction. So what's the pulse of the business? What's the heartbeat of the business? What does that cadence look like? And it's so easy to have, death by meeting, death by PowerPoint. And actually, how do you streamline workflows where you create forums for any person to raise an improvement or an issue or an idea, but then have a cadence where you can action off the back of that? And when you action that, how do you create accountability within that? So, it's those are some of the techniques and sort of approaches to business, which I think are really, really important going from a startup into that sort of scale up journey.
Well, let's pause there, because what Thomas is really talking about here is one of the most important transitions that any founder ever has to make. In essence, the founder who starts a business is not the same one who scales it, whether that's the same person or the same mentality. In the early days of the business, right, the founder has to do everything. You're the salesperson, the marketeer, the operator, the problem solver, the decision maker, the person who knows where everything is, what everything costs, who's doing what, what's late, what's broken, and what needs fixing next. And at that stage, being deeply in the weeds is often a strength. It's how the thing gets built in the first place. But what gets the business off the ground is not always what will help it to scale. Because once the company starts growing, the founder, who touches everything, can actually become the bottleneck in the business. The person who was the main catalyst can become the biggest problem. The person who used to make the business work can accidentally become the reason that it stops evolving. And that is a shift that Thomas is describing here. You move from being the person who does everything to the person who builds the people, the systems, the clarity, and the structure that does everything. And that's hard, because for a lot of founders, myself included, the detail feels safe, the chaos feels familiar, the control feels earned. But scale asks something different of you. Clearer roles, better people, more processes, more systems. Often that's a very different version of leadership. The lesson here is not just about hiring, it's about a shift in mentality, and in some instances, a change of identity. And that is what real scale can often look like. And that's why the founder who starts the business cannot stay exactly the same if they want the business to grow beyond them. But it's still a big and difficult decision and point to get across. Now, let's get back to it. Who is teaching you this? Because obviously, like I say, as the generalist CEO at the top of the org chart, you've kind of got to delineate the roles, responsibilities, SOPs, all that stuff. But you only know what you know. Was there something you were reading? Was there like a MBA thing you were studying at weekends, or where were you getting it from? Or did you just sort of like cobble it together as you were going and growing?
Yeah, no, I think as any sort of entrepreneur, like you firstly need to accept like that you like know nothing. Like and the reality is, even a big organization CEO, I've sat down with CEOs now, spent time with CEOs of £1 billion companies, and they're just normal people, right? And actually they've been on a journey to get into that role, but actually like there's no magic source or magic bullet that creates success or growth. It's just a culmination of doing the right things that are needed at the right time. And yeah, like I've always had that mindset of like continuous improvements. So can you improve every single day? If you improve by, 0.1% every single day, like over 2, 3, 4 years, like that is astronomical growth. And so with that mindset, you need to be willing to learn and then relearn. And I think that's one of the hardest things, generally is for anyone, is to be like, okay, well, I thought it was good to do things this way, but actually I've learned a new thing now, and actually we can do things this way. And so not blocking that within an organization while also creating guardrails so you don't end up going into multiple different directions all of the time, allows you to begin to get traction. And yeah, I'm a deep, relatively avid reader, a lot of entrepreneurial and business books, like there's millions out there, but there are some really good tools out there in terms of entrepreneurial operating systems.
Well, if there was one entrepreneurial book that you would hand to another founder of an FMCG brand as they're getting started, what would that book be?
I would probably say The Advantage, and that is, yeah, so let me get the author up. I've probably not read it in about a year or so. Let me grab.
Do you go back to it? Is that one that you?
Yeah.
Read again and
I've
again?
read that multiple times. So let me give you the author of it, Patrick Lencioni. So yeah, I'd say The Advantage. That's a powerful book. Sort of, and it talks, and that book is basically all about organizational health, and basically like organizational health is the biggest advantage in business. And yeah, it gives like some really tangible tools that you can apply within the organization to to build organizational health. So vulnerability, commitment, accountability, results, and yeah, like if you can create cycles that just generate and then regenerate that, it's really powerful.
Got to be respectful of your time. I was going to talk to you about the partners, Brentford, Leicester Tigers, Everton, Celtic, all that stuff. We probably haven't got time for it. We might have to do a round 2. It's unbelievable that this hasn't come up yet. One of the things I definitely want to touch on, though, because it sounds like you and Dad and the family put so much sweat equity and cash in to start with, to bootstrap it, cash flow it, fund it to start with. But you guys have just taken on sort of investment from another drinks brand, AG Barr, who are most famous. They're obviously famous for quite a few drinks, but most famous for Iron Brew. Still one of the best drinks of all time, by the way. I know it's not functionally healthy, but once in a while, I love an Iron Brew. What was the thinking behind investment, and why now and why them?
Yeah, no, I think obviously massively privileged to have had investment from their publicly listed company, right? They're one of the biggest beverage businesses in the UK,
still family operated.
And yeah, one of the reasons why we agreed to partner with them was the fact that their family are still minority majority shareholders,
right?
Of the business, which is absolutely fascinating. And the history of AG Barr and Iron Brew is, a lot resonated with us. And, we sort of see, as I said, imagine in 100 years' time, the Turmeric Co and what we're building within functional beverage, has that same legacy and has that same impact on society. And, it was a big step for us, like being able to move to that next level of investing into capability, investing into growth, was a really, really important step of our journey. And yeah, typically a lot of FMCG brands will go down to the private equity route or, venture capital funding route, and to have a strategic partner who is excited about this functional beverage space with best in class business knowledge, was a no-brainer for us. So really exciting step for us as a business, and we're now even more focused and even more resourced to go on and execute our plans.
What's the biggest shift? Because obviously that's only happened about a year-ish ago from what I could work out. What's the biggest shift that's happened since that's come on board? Is it how they did the due diligence, or how you had to get yourself set up for the for the investment, or is it something else entirely that's been the biggest, like, wow, okay, now we really are going to the next level again?
Yeah, no, it's you get a glimpse into, you know, what best in class looks like, basically. Like, just
Was that a bit of a surprise? Because you guys have obviously, you've made your own vertical integration, and you've kind of had to do it inwardly to look outside of that and go, oh, we could do that as well. That's amazing.
yeah. I think no, they wouldn't have invested if they didn't see, you
Of
know,
course.
what we were doing and the level that we were doing. So, you know, again, that was testament to what we had built. But yeah, I would say, yeah, that ability to operate at that level just consistently and continuously. You know, they employ over 1,000 employees throughout their business, and they're fully vertically integrated, albeit in a different category. But they've got knowledge of beverage, and you know, I think that willingness to invest into functional and health, I think, you know, they should also be championed, you know, for doing that. Like, they are now a direct contributor to, you know, us having impacted 20,000 people, you know, changed 20,000 people's lives. And actually, as I said, you know, what happens when we've done that to 1 million people? You know, what type of dent on society have we had in a positive way when we have 1 million life-changing testimonials? And yeah, I think credit to, you know, AG Barr, to the board there, you know, to their exec team leadership. And yeah, as I said, it's the next stage of that journey to really accelerate everything that we've been doing and do what we've done already, but better.
Wrapping up then, what's the thing you're most excited about right now? So you've sort of gone from startup to scale up to investable scale up. Now you're going to take things to the next level. Is there another product offering coming down the line? Is there you know, Dad's concept for meal preps? Are we going down that route? Are you sort of staying in the vertical that you're in? What are you most excited about for the next, say, 18 months?
Yeah, no, I'd say all of the above, without disclosing too much. No, I think, yeah, there's a lot of exciting things happening. I would say we've expanded our capability. So we have the Turmeric Co as our, you know, functional shop brand. We launched last year a natural hydration range under a brand called Raw Hydrate. So we're looking to scale that, and that's basically a range of natural hydration juices using whole watermelon. So, you know, typically hydration sits in, you know, sort of that water and isotonic space, but then you have sort of players in that space like Lucozade as an example, where, you know, the reality is would you want your kid drinking a Lucozade, or actually, as a Premier League footballer, should you be drinking Lucozade? Like, I would argue, based on my understanding of health and the impact of, you know, sugar and sweeteners and preservatives, like, no, you don't want that, right? So actually, Raw Hydrate we see as an exciting opportunity to really revolutionize the hydration space and begin to deliver natural hydration options. And again, we've kicked off clinical research on Raw Hydrate, and it shows that drinking Raw Hydrate has the same impact on hydration that both Lucozade and water have, but actually it has a 50% lower blood glucose spike.
Oh, wow.
When consumed. So, you know, so we've got all of that in the pipeline. So that's really exciting. Innovation into other formats as well. I won't disclose too much, but there's a lot of work ongoing in that. But the biggest thing I'm probably excited about with the Turmeric Co is the acceleration of the work that we're doing around research and healthcare. We are in the process of preparing for a double-blind placebo clinical study, which will be a significant study, and we will be tracking the impact of the Turmeric Co shots on specific blood markers around inflammation and pain and recovery versus paracetamol, ibuprofen, and diclofenac. And I believe that the Turmeric Co shots will deliver as good, if not more of an impact than this standard medication, but with zero side effects. So I'm excited to see that develop.
And then you're not having to say the word anecdotal whenever you talk about the proof that you've got.
Yeah, I don't actually have to say it now, to be honest. We've got the data, but yeah, for compliance, I'll say anecdotal.
Yeah. Where's the best place for people to find out more information about what you guys are doing? Because I think it's a fascinating journey. I get the feeling you're only just getting started.
No, thank you. No, it's you can find us online. So the Turmeric Co, pop it into Google, visit our website. We've got our own online store. We sell on Amazon. We sell in Sainsbury's, in Tesco's, Ocado's, Boots, and more to come. And yeah, give us a follow on socials. We're very active on socials. We've built an amazing community. We're building education and awareness as well as we can, given the sort of compliance and, regulation around us making claims. But actually, as I said, check out our reviews on Trustpilot. We've been capturing reviews on there for 6 or 7 months. I think we're nearly at 1,000 already just on there alone. We've got 20,000 on our direct to consumer store. But yeah, have a read through of them and you'll see firsthand the impact we're having.
Amazing. I wish you well with it all. Thomas, thank you for your time.
Amazing. Thanks, Jay. Really appreciate
Cheers, mate.
it.
Thank you.